In the final days before abdication, at Fort Belvedere in Windsor Great Park, Edward VIII's gifts to Wallis Simpson became gestures of defiance. Among them was an emerald bracelet and Colombian stones set in platinum, whose provenance was later disputed. Those stones came from royal reserves, and their ownership was never clearly transferred. Outside, constitutional machinery ground toward abdication. Inside, adornment carried the weight of choice over duty. The bracelet had belonged to the Crown's reserve collection, part of Queen Mary's carefully catalogued holdings. As each clasp locked with a soft click, it sealed both a promise and a theft. The jewels Edward gave Wallis were never entirely his to give. What followed was not a love story told in gemstones, but a 40-year dispute over beauty, ownership, and the price of choosing desire over duty. Subscribe if you want to understand how royal jewelry became the language of an unforgivable romance. By the time Edward became Prince of Wales in 1910, Queen Mary had spent decades assembling one of Europe's most formidable personal jewelry collections. She acquired pieces through inheritance, commission, and strategic purchase, meticulously recording each acquisition in Lord Chamberlain's inventory ledgers. These records, preserved in royal archives, distinguished between crown property, jewels belonging to the monarchy itself, and personal items owned by individual royals. But the line blurred. Edward, as heir and then briefly as king, had access to both categories. He treated the royal vault as if it were his inheritance rather than his stewardship. The confusion was not accidental. Royal protocol assumed continuity, tradition, the unbroken passage of symbols through generations. It did not account for a king who saw jewels as currency for a different kind of loyalty. Queen Mary's emeralds, her diamond bracelets, and the sapphires she had received as a young bride were not meant to leave the family. They were meant to anchor it. Between 1934 and 1935, while still married to Ernest Simpson and before Edward's accession, Wallis began receiving jewels. Cartier's Paris atelier recorded commissions paid for by the Prince of Wales, an emerald engagement ring in 1935, and a charm bracelet with inscribed crosses representing significant dates in their courtship. But jeweler invoices reveal a pattern. Edward requested settings for stones he supplied himself, not stones purchased new. Royal Vault withdrawal records from the same period show discrepancies. Pieces listed as temporarily removed for cleaning never returned. The symbolism cut deeper than romance. Edward was replacing his wife's jewelry, the public-sanctioned adornment of the Princess of Wales, with his mistress's private collection. Each gift to Wallis erased a ceremonial obligation to someone else. The charm bracelet required multiple commissions between 1935 and 1936, each charm marking a moment the world was not supposed to witness. Cartier's craftsmen worked in discretion, understanding that what they created was both a love token and a political scandal, compressed into platinum and gold. The question of ownership became urgent by late 1936. Which jewels were Edward's to bestow? In letters from 1936, Queen Mary wrote to her son with unusual directness. Archival correspondence held at Windsor Castle shows her listing specific pieces: emeralds she had loaned him for temporary display, sapphires designated as crown property, diamond bracelets meant for future Queen's consort. Her protest was not sentimental. It was constitutional. Personal property could be gifted. State property could not. Edward, either through willful misunderstanding or deliberate defiance, treated the distinction as irrelevant. His mother's inventory disputes arrived with polite fury, questioning his right to dispose of pieces never legally transferred to him. But he had already disposed of them. By December, when abdication became inevitable, the jewelry question fractured the family as deeply as the marriage question had. Each emerald Edward fastened on Wallis's wrist was a love token made from dynastic symbols, stones that had witnessed coronations now adorning a woman who would never be crowned. In early 1936, society photographer Cecil Beaton captured Wallis wearing what appeared to be royal emeralds during gatherings at Fort Belvedere. The images circulated in American publications with fascination and in British papers with restrained horror. Press coverage diverged sharply, with American publications celebrating the romance and British coverage remaining circumspect about provenance. The emeralds became a political statement before they became a scandal. For Edward, jewelry was proof, tangible, glittering evidence that he had chosen Wallis over the crown. For the establishment, the same jewels were proof of constitutional recklessness. Each public appearance where Wallis wore royal pieces was a small abdication in gemstone form. The symbolism was ancient. Monarchs had always used jewelry to communicate legitimacy, alliance, and power. Edward reversed the language. His gifts to Wallis communicated illegitimacy, rupture, and the subordination of duty to desire. The world watched a king dismantle his own authority one bracelet at a time. In December 1936, as the abdication finalized, Edward made careful selections. Customs records and Windsor estate shipping manifests document what accompanied him into exile. Numerous pieces of jewelry, most commissioned for Wallis, several of disputed provenance. The emerald bracelet, a sapphire and diamond necklace, Art Deco brooches from Cartier. Queen Mary, informed of the departures, ordered an immediate royal vault inventory. The audit, completed in early 1937, revealed gaps, pieces missing, others replaced with inferior stones, some simply unaccounted for. Correspondence between the Lord Chamberlain and Buckingham Palace legal advisors shows alarm carefully worded as administrative concern. What Edward took to France was more than personal property. He took portable monarchy, symbols of power reconfigured as luggage. The jewels became his only inheritance from a role he had abandoned. Their weight, the only crown he would carry forward. Wallis's collection, assembled from fragments of royal history, transformed her into a duchess without a duchy, a queen of nothing but emeralds and exile. Between 1937 and the early 1950s, Wallis's jewelry collection expanded with relentless ambition. Cartier commissions continued, the famous Panther bracelet delivered in the early 1950s, paved diamonds and onyx forming a sleek, coiled predator. But how were these funded? The Duke of Windsor's allowance from the royal family, grudgingly negotiated and frequently disputed, barely covered their lifestyle. The funding sources remained unclear, though the Duke's limited allowance made such extravagance difficult to explain. Provenance documentation from Sotheby's 1987 auction catalogue traces some pieces back to this period of transformation: emeralds reset into modern designs, diamonds extracted from Victorian settings and remounted in Art Deco geometry. The symbolism darkened. Wallis was accumulating what she could never officially inherit: beauty without legitimacy, splendor without sovereignty. While the Duke's influence shrank with each passing year, confined to social irrelevance in Paris and the Bahamas, Wallis's jewelry vault expanded. Adornment became her only empire. Queen Mary never saw Wallis Simpson. Her refusal was absolute, documented in family letters and estate papers preserved at Windsor. But the jewels stood between them with equal permanence. Royal correspondence from 1938 onward shows Mary's recurring inquiries about specific pieces. Where were the Cambridge emeralds? What had become of the sapphire choker? Buckingham Palace staff deflected. The Duke in Paris ignored her questions. The rupture was complete. For Queen Mary, trained in the symbolic language of dynastic continuity, each missing jewel was a stolen sentence from the family's history. For Wallis, each piece was validation, proof that Edward had chosen her over everything his mother represented. The gemstones were worth more than reconciliation, because they made reconciliation impossible. A mother could forgive a son's romantic choice. She could not forgive the dismantling of symbols meant to outlast them all. The jewelry question, never resolved in Mary's lifetime, remained open at her death in 1953. During the Second World War, the Duke and Duchess lived in Nassau, Bahamas, where Edward served as governor. Insurance valuations during the 1940s listed Wallis's jewelry at extraordinary sums for wartime, raising questions given Britain's austerity measures. The jewels required specialized vault storage and round-the-clock security. Security concerns during their wartime posting became a matter of colonial administrative record. While Europe burned and Britain endured rationing, the Windsors held onto beauty amid displacement. The jewels served as both comfort and anchor, portable reminders of what Edward had surrendered and what Wallace had gained. Holding them through wartime exile meant more than preservation. It meant refusing to let history reclaim what scandal had bestowed. The emeralds glittered through blackout curtains, untouched by the world's emergency, symbols of a private sovereignty that required no territory, only platinum settings and velvet-lined cases locked against a world at war. After the early 1950s, Wallis began systematically redesigning her collection. Cartier and Van Cleef and Arpels records show commissions for resettings, Victorian pieces transformed into sleek modern designs, family emeralds extracted from their original mounts and set into abstract geometries. Jeweler sketches and invoices archived by the houses themselves reveal Wallis's aesthetic preferences, bold, angular, stripped of historical sentimentality. She was erasing the original royal context, breaking apart the very symbols that had caused the abdication crisis. A brooch Queen Mary had worn to George V's coronation became a bracelet Wallis wore to Paris nightclubs. The emotional core of these alterations was unmistakable. Wallis was rewriting provenance in platinum and gold. Each resetting declared that these jewels belonged to her now, not to the history Edward had stolen them from. The past could be melted down and remade. Beauty required no memory, only skill and certainty. She commissioned her own legacy, one clasp at a time. When the Duke of Windsor died in May 1972, his will contained a simple directive: all jewelry passes to the Duchess. Legal disputes erupted immediately. The royal family's solicitors argued that certain pieces, specifically the emeralds and a sapphire suite, were crown property, loaned but never legally transferred. Probate records from Paris courts show the Duchess's legal team countering that decades of possession constituted ownership, that Edward had acted within his rights as former king and private citizen. The case never reached formal litigation. A quiet settlement, its terms never disclosed, was reached within months. Estate documents suggest some pieces were returned to royal collections, others retained by Wallis. The precise inventory remained sealed. What became clear was the central symbolism. The jewels had outlasted the man who stole them. Edward was gone. Wallis remained, surrounded by emeralds that had witnessed everything: abdication, exile, war, and now widowhood. The stones had no loyalty. They simply endured. On April 2, 1987, Sotheby's Geneva opened an unprecedented auction titled The Jewels of the Duchess of Windsor. 306 lots went on the block. The sale ultimately exceeded $50 million, shattering estimates. The auction catalogue itself became a historical document, each entry annotated with provenance, often listed as disputed, or with origin described as uncertain. Bidders did not care. They paid premiums not for beauty alone, but for scandal's residue, the mark of a romance that had fractured a monarchy. A Cartier flamingo brooch, never worn publicly, sold for 6 times its estimate. The emerald engagement ring Edward had commissioned in 1935 went to an anonymous buyer for a sum Sotheby's never disclosed. Buyer anonymity was standard, but rumours circulated. Some pieces returned to British royal vaults through intermediaries, others disappeared into private collections in Geneva, New York, and Dubai. The public fascination was undeniable. These were not simply jewels, they were evidence. Today, fragments of Wallis's collection reside in museums and private hands across 3 continents. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York displays the Cartier flamingo brooch in its jewelry galleries. Acquisition records noting its provenance from the 1987 auction. Other pieces remain deliberately obscure. Unconfirmed reports suggest certain emeralds were quietly returned to the royal collection, though Buckingham Palace has never acknowledged this. Museum catalogue entries are careful and clinical. They record formerly owned by the Duchess of Windsor, without elaborating on how she obtained them. The jewels survived beyond the love story that created them. They outlasted Edward's brief reign, Wallis's long widowhood, and the century's judgment. Separated now, scattered across institutions and private safes, they no longer form a collection. They are fragments of a fracture, beautiful and silent, waiting in velvet-lined cases for scholars who understand that jewelry, like monarchy itself, is a language spoken in gestures the world was never meant to decode. What remains unresolved is not ownership, time and auction settled that, but meaning. Did Edward have the right to give what he gave? Legally, the question dissolved into settlements and sealed files. Morally, it persists. Queen Elizabeth II, who ascended because Edward abdicated, never publicly commented on the jewelry dispute. Her private response, if documented, remains in archives closed to researchers. The current location of the disputed emeralds, the ones from Fort Belvedere, December 1936, is officially unknown. They may rest in the royal collection's private vaults. They may hang in a Dubai bedroom. They may have been broken apart and reset so thoroughly that their provenance is now untraceable. The final reflection is not about right or wrong, but about what jewels reveal. That Edward valued Wallis more than dynasty. That Wallis valued beauty more than acceptance. That some choices, once made in gemstones, can never be unmade. The question is not whether he had the right, it is whether it matters now. The emerald bracelet Edward gave Wallis in those final days at Fort Belvedere appeared decades later behind glass at Sotheby's Geneva Preview exhibition. Under gallery lighting, the stones refracted differently, colder and more distant, stripped of the warmth of lamplight and intimacy. The auction catalogue card beneath read simply, Lot 89 Emerald and Platinum Bracelet. Provenance disputed. No romance, no abdication, just gemstones and uncertainty. The Museum of History offers no moral verdict, only witness to choice. What the jewels saw, Edward's determination in those last hours, Wallis's wrist accepting weight she would spend a lifetime defending, Queen Mary's silence harder than diamonds, remains locked inside facets that hold light but reveal nothing. The bracelet sold to an anonymous bidder. Its current location is unknown. Somewhere in a vault or on a wrist, the emeralds continue catching light, refracted and cold, carrying their scandal like a flaw inside the stone, invisible until you know to look for it.